You just got engaged, most likely have a wedding date and venue chosen. What's next? Probably finding a photographer, right? In the first of a two-part series, I share with you what questions to ask prospective wedding photographers before hiring one, so let's get started. Hi there, brides and grooms. Henry of Avita's Weddings here, a wedding photographer based out of Southern California. Being a wedding photographer for over 10 years, I've had the opportunity to meet hundreds and hundreds of amazing couples. And through that experience, I picked up the most important questions and concerns that they have when it comes to photography. So if you're currently in the process of finding a wedding photographer and want to be 100% sure that you make the right choice, this is the video for you. In this first part, I share with you questions focused more on before your wedding day, and in part two, we'll tackle questions specific to the day in itself and even afterwards. Some quick advice beforehand. Be sure to start looking for a wedding photographer right away. I recommend no later than 6 to 8 months before your wedding. Generally, the best ones get booked 8 to 10 plus months out in advance, even over a year, especially for popular times of the years and holiday weekends. Also, pay attention to their customer service when it comes to emails and phone calls. If they're taking more than, say, 2 business days to get back to you, or their responses just don't quite answer your question, then that's a huge red flag that they aren't a good fit for you. Lastly, if at any time you and your fiance feel uncomfortable or just that uneasy inside when you're meeting with a prospective photographer, then trust your gut instinct and move on to the next one. All right, let's get to the questions now. Number 1, what is your experience photographing weddings as a main or solo shooter? You want to not only know how long that photographer has been capturing weddings, but even how many. And of those amounts, how many were as the primary or lead versus a second shooter? Would you trust someone that has, say, photographed 20 weddings in 5 years, or 40 weddings in just 2 years? 10 weddings as a second shooter, or just 5 weddings but as the main, right? That's something to think about. It's not just the length of experience, but also the quality and quantity of the weddings they photographed. The second question to ask a prospective photographer when you meet with them is, have you photographed at my venue before? Now, I personally don't think this is a deal breaker if the photographer you're considering has not worked at your venue, but it certainly helps if they have. That means that photographer knows the place very well, like where the best spots for portraits are, and even logistical things like getting there, parking, and even knowing the staff already. Double brownie points if the venue itself has that particular photographer on their preferred vendor list. Moving along to the third question to ask a photographer is, have you photographed a similar type, culture, a faith, a setting of a wedding that's similar to mine? One thing you definitely want to ask them, your potential photographer, especially if you're having, say, a cultural, ethnic, a same-sex, or just a type of wedding that you're concerned they don't have experience in, especially if you didn't see that many photos on their website. Although, of course, every wedding is unique and special in its own way, it's really important your prospective photographer is familiar with certain customs, traditions, rituals, or so that you'll be having. Not only that, but to actually show you several photos to illustrate that point. How many photos? Well, enough to make you feel confident that they can capture your day beautifully and thoroughly. And now 3A, this is kind of like an extension of a question of the previous one, but Could you show us, photographer, a full wedding gallery or even more, preferably one similar to your couple type of wedding? And do you have any albums that we can look at? One of the biggest benefits of a client consultation, especially an in-person one, is you get to see physical products that you couldn't otherwise, especially if you're thinking of ordering an album or two and possibly some quality prints and canvases. But regardless of where you have your meeting, online or in person, ask the prospective photographer to show you full wedding galleries, in particular recent weddings and ones similar to yours if possible. This will give you a really good idea of what they're capable of, what they can capture from getting ready towards the end of the reception. Okay, fourth question. What is your style of photography? How do you go about photographing a wedding? What's your vision? Ooh, this is not the easiest question for a photographer to answer, but they should have a good response. Whether it's more light and airy, vibrant, moody, classic, modern, editorial, lifestyle, traditional, high-end, elegant, there's countless adjectives to describe a photographer's style. I would actually focus more on how they approach a wedding more so than the actual adjectives they use, and also their philosophy, how they are in certain situations, and just their overall vision. When it comes to style, chances are, if you're meeting with this photographer, you already like it, and that's what matters most. Number 5, focusing now a bit more on a few things we can easily forget to ask. Do you have liability insurance, a business license, backup equipment? It's easy to just fall in love with the photographer's work and assume everything will work out smoothly on your big day. While that's probably the case 99% of the time, it's still absolutely critical your photographer has a few essential things to ensure everyone is protected. Liability insurance ensures if something were to go wrong at the venue because of the photographer, they will not be coming after you or them. A third-party insurance company will step in and resolve the issue. Now, a business license here just ensures the photographer is legally operating their business. It's peace of mind for you to know they're taking their photography seriously. That is not just some kind of a side hobby, something they do when it's convenient kind of thing. And now with backup equipment, this is something you shouldn't even have to ask, but hey, you can never be too sure, right? What happens if the photographer's main set of gear breaks or heaven forbid gets stolen on your wedding day? What will they do about it? What's their backup plan? Yikes, we don't even want to think about that, but still, it's worth asking. Second half of questions here, number 6, and this one, I don't think it's actually terribly important, but still worth asking. And that is, do you shoot other things besides weddings? Prospective photographer, is this your main profession or more on the side? It's just nice to know their primary focus will be actually on weddings, and possibly if they're even doing this, say, as a full-time living, like somebody here. But just be cautious of those that may only shoot, say, a handful or less of weddings per year, and they're calling themselves a full-time professional wedding photographer. It's more than fine that they capture a variety of things like families, corporate events, products, and so forth, and that they can actually be a benefit. But hey, you just want to make sure they're consistently photographing weddings. Just ask yourself, would you trust someone that photographs weddings, say, maybe once a month or two, and is more of a side income, if even that, or someone that solely does weddings and it's their livelihood? Think about that, right? All right, question number 7, and this is actually one of my personal favorites. That is, can you give us an overall idea of what the client experience process is like working with you, prospective photographer, from beginning to end. Don't forget that when you hire a wedding photographer, our job isn't just to show up to your special day, turn on the camera, just snap a few photos, and hey, call it a day. Quality photography means planning and preparation, weeks if not months before your wedding day. And what about, say, an engagement session if you decide to have one? How will your potential photographer help you prepare for that? What can you expect from them from the moment that you inquire, meeting with them now, signing the contract, paying the deposit, and making everything all official? Will the level of communication still be the same? And to some extent, which we'll talk about in part 2 of this series, what can you now as a married couple after your wedding expect then? The delivery of products, the schedule, the expectation, all of that is part of the client experience process. Okay, number 8, we're almost done. Moving along. How big is your photography team, your studio? Who do you use as your second shooter or even assistant? Now, chances are you'll find answers to all of this on the photographer's website, at least if it's like a studio with team members and all, but it's still worth asking during your meeting. You just want to make sure you're actually talking to the photographer that's going to photograph your wedding, or if not, you're fully aware of that and actually fine with it. In addition, if you're paying for a second shooter, that the main photographer, they don't bring, say, their high school friend that's looking to get into weddings, just someone that they've never even worked with, let alone actually been to a wedding and shot one, and worse, they show up in t-shirts and shorts. Oh my gosh, I guess unless it's a beach wedding, but still, you don't want to ever get into that situation. It would just be an absolute nightmare. Now, you don't need to get everyone's names and their addresses or so, but at the very least, make sure with the main photographer that all team members are professionals and actually have experience photographing weddings. Imagine that, right? Hope that sounds good. Okay, question number 9. Let's get to the pink elephant question type in the room. One, I'm sure other wedding photographers are going to despise me for even bringing up in this video. And that question is your pricing set in stone? Is there any wiggle room in its sense? Hey, I'm having a Friday wedding, or it's during the off season. Now, from a photographer's perspective, I think I speak for all of us when we say that we don't mind price shoppers, but to just be upfront and honest with it. And say your budget is $3,000 and you're looking for items A, B, and C. Please don't all of a sudden change your tune and your mind during the meeting. And now your budget is just $2,000, but you want A, B, C, D, and E. I'm sure some of us are willing to be a bit flexible and would love to work out something that's reasonable for both parties. Just be sure you do your homework on what your actual budget is, and if you can afford the photographer that you're considering before having a meeting, there should be no surprises when you do meet with the photographer on the pricing and packages and putting everything together. If anything, a consultation should be more to get to know each other, look more at their work, like albums, prints, and so forth, and finalize any pricing, packaging questions if you do decide to move forward. Whew, okay, got that one out of the way. 10th and final question. This is definitely something we as photographers don't mind being asked, and that is, what is required to book you? When is the remaining balance due? Ah, yes, we're so close to getting to work with you, but we want to make sure there's no misunderstanding on how to make everything official. There should absolutely be a contract involved, one that has been looked over by a lawyer with all the essential info and terms and conditions that protects both you as the client, the bride and groom, and the photographer. Along with the contract, a retainer fee is required, usually 25%, but sometimes it could be as much as 50%. And the remaining balance is generally due a month before your wedding day. Brownie points if the photographer you're looking to hire makes it possible for you to fill out and sign the contract, as well as pay the retainer fee with your credit card, and all online. No need to print out and scan paper or mail a check that could potentially get lost, just making it that much easier and quicker for you to secure your wedding photographer. Whew! Okay, we did it, but those are 10 questions to ask your wedding photographer before you hire one, specifically focusing on before the wedding day.